I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think that e-ink, if you're reading digitally, is hands down the superior way to read. But what about if what you're reading doesn't just have words? I've previously spoken about my love for e-ink, my fascination with it as a technology, and the reasons why, even though you twist my arm, and yeah, I agree, I'd rather have a physical book, but just from a practical standpoint, I prefer e-ink over just about any other way. The portability, the versatility, the ability to, in many cases, read in dim or poor lighting conditions. Overall, I just think it's great. But a question was asked to me. What's the best way to read digital comics? So I thought we'd take a look at that today and compare a number of different devices. We're going to be looking at how do they perform with black and white comics as well as color. And then we're going to see if we can decide what's the best way for you to read your digital comics. Now, when it comes to reading digital comics, there are a lot of trade-offs that you're looking for. Certainly, there's a versatility with something like an iPad, but then you run into all the problems of a backlit LCD or OLED screen. You get the eye strain, the fatigue, those sorts of things. In theory, e-ink screens are going to help us circumvent that. But are they good enough, especially when it comes to color, to beat out things like an iPad or an Android tablet, something with that full-color rich screen? We're going to check out a bunch of different devices and we're going to see how they perform. Now, things aren't going to be perfect on video as they may be if we were seeing them in real life, but I think this is going to give you a pretty good representation of how do these devices perform and how do they look, and maybe we can figure out what ultimately is the best option. Let's start with the Kindle Scribe. Now, a new version of the Kindle Scribe has been announced, including one that has color, but those aren't out yet. So we're going to look at what's available right now. This is the still first generation Kindle Scribe, but the second one that they released. This is great for looking at black and white comics that you've bought from Amazon, but that's it. It's extremely limited. What we have here is the first volume of the complete Elf Quest that I purchased through Amazon. And you can see it performs quite nicely. The page turn is quick. We have crisp pictures and text, and the Amazon, because they integrated Comixology, does have a nice thing where if we double tap, it's going to go kind of panel by panel. Now, when you turn the page, it's going to jump back out. Something to note, but easy to double tap and go back into panel mode. Still, as you can see, zooming in this way, when it goes into panel mode, things are not nearly as crisp as they were. Still, overall, it performs quickly, the page turns happen responsively, and it doesn't look like it's lagging too much. I think that in the limited cases where you've purchased a black and white comic from Amazon and you want to read on something that's e-ink, this is a decent choice. But that's it. That's where the Kindle Scribe stops. It's not going to be good for anything color, at least not yet. Now, let's compare that to the Remarkable Paper Pro. This is the most recent Remarkable device, with the exception of the Move. It's got color, and it does have a front light. Now, the front light is at maximum brightness, and it does not go nearly as bright as many of the other things, but that's okay in most circumstances. As you can see, it too renders things nice, sharp, and clear with a good resolution. Now, the resolution isn't quite as high as on the Kindle Scribe, but it's difficult to see right out of the gate. One thing you're going to notice, though, is the performance as we turn pages with the Remarkable isn't anywhere as quick as it was on the Kindle Scribe. So you can see a little bit of ghosting every time you turn the page. Because this is just reading a PDF, it isn't reading anything special. It does not have the ability to do that panel thing. So if we double tap, it doesn't do anything. Can you zoom in? Yes, you can. And then you've got to try and pan around. But because of the nature of the e-ink screen, you can see that's not a great experience. This is really something that you're going to need to read full page. I'll be honest, because of the limitations of the Remarkable and where it really does want to be more of a note-taking device than a reading device, despite what they say about reading and annotating PDFs, when it comes to a large PDF file, this one's about 500 or so megabytes, it's pretty slow. Again, We get that refresh every time we turn the page, and I don't think that it's a great reading option for this. Now, what about the Kobo Libra Color? I kind of think Kobo devices are pretty cool. In part because, hey, at least we're not stuck in the Amazon ecosystem. And anything that gives Amazon even a semblance of competition, that's pretty okay as far as I'm concerned. Still, this one's mostly limited based on its size. But I had it available, it does have a color screen, and I thought it made sense to include it into the comparison. Now, as opposed to the Kindle, where you're stuck with anything that you can buy from Amazon without having to try and jailbreak and do some things that I don't think normal people are going to try and do, the Kobos are really nice in that it comes out of the gate, plug it into a computer, and it just looks at it as if it were an SD card. It was trivial for me to plug this in and copy some comic books over, and boom, there they were in the library. Super easy. It gets big points for me for that. The other thing that's really nice is this has page turn buttons. Not everybody needs them. Not everybody wants them. But I love having the physical page turn buttons. And that makes it fairly easy to advance. It has a small screen, but it is bright. It is crisp. Honestly, if you want to read digital comics on the go, especially black and white, this is an excellent option. You can see there is a little bit of that ghosting as it changes pages, but it does so dramatically faster than the remarkable Paper Pro does. Now, what about the Boox Tab X C? The X means this thing's extra big, and the C is for color. So this is an Android-based color e-ink tablet. As you can see, it's got a 13-inch screen, so we've got a lot of real estate. In terms of the form factor, it's actually pretty nice and thin. It's well built, and it feels nice in the hand. It feels like a very well-built device that, again, really does look pretty nice. Boox makes some pretty compelling things, but how does it work for comics? Here we've got, again, we're going back to ElfQuest, we're sticking with comparison, looking at the same format, the same file, and the same comic book across all the devices. Here you can see, it looks great. We have a nice big screen, good resolution, things look crisp and sharp. Still, we get a little bit of that refresh when we go from page to page, but it still feels like that's happening quite a bit quicker on this device than it was on the remarkable Paper Pro. Other things this does, because this is designed as a reader, it has more options than the Remarkable does. The Remarkable is pretty rudimentary when it comes to moving through the comic. You can just open up a thing and you'll get a bunch of thumbnails that take a long time to load. We'll look at that in a bit. This actually, if we come in here, we get some more navigation across the bottom, and you can see it's actually fairly quick to be able to scroll quite a ways ahead. You can get some auto page turns if you want, and again, we have more tools up here. Because it does have a pencil and a pen, you could use this and you could take some notes just like you could on the Remarkable, on the Kobo, or on the Kindle. But I think that overall, if you want a larger device, as far as the e-ink goes, this is probably your best bet. I think that as far as things have gone, at least so far, looking at the e-ink devices, if you want a large thing, which most of the time you do for comics, I think this is much better than the things we've tried so far. Definitely beats out the Kindle Scribe in terms of its versatility, in terms of its speed, and the ability to put anything you want on there. Another thing that's really nice about this that we'll look at comparing the others, not only does this do PDFs, this will also do CBRs and CBZs. Now that's just kind of a zip format for comic books specifically, but the native reader application on the Boox devices is able to manage CBRs and CBZs right out of the gate. There's a huge advantage to CBRs and CBZs because it's a zip file, things are compressed. Things are going to look just as good, but it's a smaller file and the performance is dramatically better. But I wanted to do a complete comparison. So we're going to include the iPad. Now this is the M4 iPad Pro 11-inch. If you have a 13-inch, obviously you're going to get a little bit more real estate. For all of these, I'm using the Panels app. Panels is an application designed specifically for comic books. The advantages of Panels are pretty dramatic when it comes to reading PDFs, CBRs, and CBZs over taking the PDFs and loading them in something like Preview or one of the many PDF apps that are available. As you can see, the screen is great. With this being the M4 version, this has that dual tandem OLED display, so it's really bright, really crisp, and it is one of the best screens. Now, one thing you may or may not be able to tell is I recently put a Paperlike screen protector on here. I specifically went with the new Paperlike 3. They have an application method that promises to be easier. There's going to be some more on that later on the channel, but It does offer a little bit less reflective coating, a little bit of anti-glare, but it does add a little something to the screen, so it's not quite as sharp as if you had this without the screen protector on it. One of the really nice things about these screen protectors on an iPad, no fingerprints. iPads are fingerprint magnets. It takes very little time for me to not be able to hardly see anything else on my iPad screen other than fingerprints, spots, little flecks of whatever. It drives me crazy. So I kind of like having one of these on just because that stuff is far less obvious. With this, you get the performance of an iPad. Now, this is looking at the PDF version, and that's going to be why you see that little gap as it's rendering every page. Because again, PDFs, not as good as CBRs and CBZs. This looks great. Now, it doesn't go panel to panel, but it will zoom in and you can see because of the processing power of the M4, I mean, come on, nothing is going to be able to compete with its speed and smoothness at being able to zoom in and scroll around the page. So, when it comes to black and white comic books, if you're dead set on e-ink, then I think one of the Boox devices, especially the higher end ones, are nicer. The Boox Tab XC is a really nice device, but it's a little big and it's kind of pricey. There's a lot of things that you can do with it beyond just read because it is running Android. At the same time, nothing that it can do is it going to do quite as smoothly as the iPad. If you want the overall best, smoothest, and most versatile experience, I think the iPad actually wins it. But what about color? Let's take a peek at that, because I think that's where things get really interesting. Let's go back and let's start again with the Remarkable Paper Pro, because again, this is a color device. And when they were getting ready to release it, they really touted up its color abilities. And they talked about it using a different kind of color e-ink screen that offered more vibrant colors. I'd had color e-ink before. Vibrant, not a word that should be used in the same sentence as color e-ink. But let's see, how does it look here? We're going to first look at the recently released Transformers US Compendium, because this is a set of comic books that I have some nostalgia for. I remember reading in physical book, and let's see how it compares. This is, again, a big PDF. This one's about 1.2 gigs, so it's gonna really be a little bit of a struggle for some of these things to look at. We'll start here, and you can see it takes a second to not only refresh like it did with black and white, but then the colors have to pop in. So that takes even longer. But it is clear, it is fairly okay to read, though some of this lettering could be a little small, and if you go to zoom in, you get all the limits that we see of ink. You're going to zoom, it's then going to refresh. If you pan, and see, that's a perfect example of these things are not nearly as responsive. Again, every time you turn a page, we refresh, and you can see it refreshes first the black and white, and then it refreshes the color. And like I said, this is a 1,200-page PDF. If you want to navigate, your only option is to come up here and wait for these panels to load. You can see with a big PDF how long this is taking to load, and it makes navigating through this almost impossible. I don't even have the patience to continue to wait for that. So let's go look at another one. We're going to look at a much smaller comic book. This time, we're going to look at Mass Effect. I love Mass Effect, my favorite series of video games ever. So let's take a peek at the Mass Effect comic book. You can see, yeah, we got color, but it's not very vibrant. And here we are, waiting for the next page to render, waiting, and there we finally have it. Honestly, I wish I could say that this was a better experience than it is, because in a lot of ways I like this device, but clearly, when it comes to reading comic books, this is not the solution. We haven't even rendered the next page, so you know what? We're going to go ahead and move on. Let's go back to that Kobo Libra Color. And the first thing I think you're going to notice, at least to my eye, this has actually got a lot more color than the Remarkable Paper Pro does. So right out of the gate, I'm saying this thing's got a better shot at being a contender. Still, the biggest limitation, it's a small screen. But you'll notice, it advances and refreshes the page significantly faster than the Remarkable did. But what about zooming in? Because we're on a small screen, we're going to have to zoom in. That's where things really start to fall apart. You zoom in and you can see all of this ghosting as it moves around. And one really nice thing it does is when you zoom, you get a little spot up here where you can see the whole page and where you're zooming in to help you figure out if you're in the right place. But despite the fact that it looks much better than the Remarkable, I think that the colors are a little bit more vibrant and it refreshes quicker. This is pretty rough to recommend reading comics on, mostly because of the size. Still, that's that 1.2 gigabyte comic, and it managed it a heck of a lot better than the Remarkable did. What about navigation? If we come in here, we have a slider across the bottom, and the slider will let you go fairly quick. And then it gives you a preview of what that page is going to be before you jump there. Some nice little touches. This is a device made to read, and so some good thought was made into reading on it. Still, I think that there are enough drawbacks, in particular the size, that this one probably isn't the best bet either. If we look at that same Mass Effect book, again, colors are a little bit better. And as we move through the pages, it's rendering the pages remarkably faster than the Remarkable. If you want something small, if you want something portable, and you're in a bit of a pinch, and if you got reading glasses like I'd probably need now, this is actually a pretty good option. Still, drawbacks in terms of the zooming isn't great, the size is difficult for comics, and you're going to really find yourself in a pinch if you're trying to see smaller details or read smaller text. But its performance, pretty damn good. All right, so let's look at the Boox Tab XC. We're taking advantage of the C part now. We're bringing in some color. When it comes to the vibrancy of the color, I think this is fairly on par with the Kobo Libra Color. It's not quite as bright, but we could still turn the backlight up. It just doesn't want to. If I hit this, it's going to say it's automatically set the backlight to try and preserve battery. So we're going to leave it alone. In terms of the performance, though, how does this perform? Page turn, so much faster than the Remarkable. Pretty much on par with the Kobo. We don't seem to have the double refresh that we saw, where first it has to refresh the black and white, and second it has to then refresh the color. What about zooming in? It does okay. Still, we get that refresh that we get with e-ink. There's no going around that. The good news is, with this having a screen as large as it is, there's probably not nearly as much of a need to zoom in. You can see, again, page turns fairly quick and responsive. The colors are as good as we have seen on any of the other e-ink devices, but they're definitely muted, and the zooming and the panning, not as smooth as would be ideal. Let's go ahead and bring up our Mass Effect. And one thing you'll actually see here on the books is it tells us in the library, PDF, PDF, CBZ, CBZ. This is where we'll get to see the improved performance of the CBZ over the PDF. So again, it works fairly quickly. It navigates well. We move through. We still have the refresh every page, but it's nothing as egregious as we were seeing on the Remarkable. If we come in, our navigation is all the same, and it navigates fairly quick. But one of the big advantages of the CBZ over a PDF is because it's that zip file, because it's compressed, it'll actually show you each page as you slide through, making it much easier to navigate than if you were reading a PDF. One of the big things that the Boox device has is that ability to natively be able to handle CBRs and CBZs out of the box. The Kobo Libra Color does as well. You don't have to convert things to PDF, but it'll take the CBZs and just run with them. That is a huge advantage. Sometimes PDF is all you have, but if you ever have an option to use a CBR or a CBZ, it is such a better reading experience than the PDF. And a lot of that is because of the nature of the file. It's not nearly as large and unwieldy, and at least to my eye, it's going to look pretty much just as good as the PDF version. So, what's the verdict when it comes to the e-ink devices? I think there's no question. The Remarkable Paper Pro, it's out. It's not even a contender. I'm enjoying my experiments in taking notes and writing with this device, but in terms of its ability to be used as a reader for anything more than, say, 10-page or lower PDF files, this isn't it. It just doesn't have the ability to handle these files in any way that I think is reasonable for someone who wants to seriously read comic books. The other thing with the Remarkable device is getting files on here. Now, you can do things like enter developer mode, and you can try and SSH into it, and a whole bunch of things. But you know what? People shouldn't have to do that to be able to read on the device. The best way to do it is you use the Remarkable app. And then what you're going to do is you're going to drop the files onto the Remarkable app. You're going to wait while those sync to the cloud. Then you're going to wait for the device to realize it needs to pull down new stuff, and then it's going to pull them down. The process is at least 5 times longer than loading anything on any of the other devices, because these devices can all do it just directly plugging into the computer. So I think the Remarkable Paper Pro is a decent device for taking notes on, but I think it really loses out when it comes to reading compared to the others. It doesn't handle nearly as many formats. It's not nearly as easy to get things onto the device, and it really just doesn't handle things very well. All you can put on are PDFs or EPUBs. It isn't going to handle comics quickly, and the performance is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I'll briefly mention the Kindle Scribe. If you're reading black and white comic books that you purchase through Amazon, it works pretty well, though the navigation, not awesome. That's not how you should be buying your comic books. You should find other ways to get them, better sources. And as much as I use Amazon and I use Kindle to read books, I kind of have a hard time recommending that anybody use them, especially for comic books. Now, a surprise contender in the group, the Kobo Libra Color. The colors look pretty good. It's nice, small, light, has physical page turn buttons. Its ability to handle PDFs as well as more comic-specific formats really make it a contender. Also, the ability to just plug it into a computer and drag and drop files and it automatically recognizes them puts it far ahead of things like the Remarkable or the Kindle. Its only real drawback is the small size. At the same time, that small size, that's a huge blessing and a benefit. This thing is so much easier to take with you. I don't know if I would recommend it for comic books, but this is a great little device, and I think more people should stop sleeping on Kobo and look at them as a real viable alternative over what Amazon is selling these days. All right, so what about the big boy in the room? That would be the Boox Tab XC. It's big, but it's well built. It's Android. You can put other apps on it, and it handles PDFs, CBRs, and CBZs very nicely right out of the gate with a default Neo Reader app that comes in it. Performance-wise, it blows away the Remarkable. It feels about on par with actually the Kobo. Surprising given the Kobo's size and kind of its price compared to this thing. If you want, though, to read big, full-page comic books and you're determined to do it with an e-ink device, this is probably your best bet. I haven't seen anything else that's even going to come close. Boox has smaller devices that are color, 10-inch devices, 7-inch devices. But I'll be honest, for comic books, I bet you really want something that's bigger. You want to be able to see the whole page as well as possibly zoom in per panel if you want. And there's very little that offers the same benefits that the Boox does. It works quickly, it's responsive, and I've been really impressed with its ability to render the pages. Its colors are as good as you're going to get with any other color e-ink device, really. And overall, I think it's a nice option. But again, I'm going to emphasize this, if you're determined to read on an e-ink device. Because now I have to say the quiet part out loud, and that is, if you want to read, especially color comic books, I don't think you're going to find anything better than an iPad. Here we are back in panels using that PDF. The colors are so much more vibrant and rich than anything we get from e-ink. The responsiveness, because this is a big PDF, we still have that brief refresh, but again, it's quick, the page turns are good, and zooming in and panning around, nothing even can come close to this. Now let's see, how does this look if we're using a CBR file or a CBZ? Let's go back to our same Mass Effect comic book. Again, so we're comparing apples to apples. The colors blow away everything else. The performance, it's buttery smooth. There's no refresh. We go from page to page to page. We can zoom in, we can pan. We get navigation down here that we can see the entire comic and scroll through. We have more options than we do on anything else. And really, one of the reasons I'm specifically saying an iPad over something like a regular Android tablet is the applications. Panels is so much better than any application for reading comics that I was able to find on the Play Store. It doesn't even come close. Panels is an amazing application. You can plug it in, you can drag and drop files. I can send them electronically. You can connect it to Dropbox, OneDrive. You can even go ahead and set up your own server to host comic book files, and Panels will tie into that. You can open Panels and you can do something really slick. Open here, say web server, start server, and boom, there's the IP address. Go on your computer, put that in, and you're going to be able to manage Panels right there from your computer. Drag, drop files, organize them, move them. Do all of that stuff in a way you just can't do with these other things. Some of the Android-based things, because they let you plug into the computer, are going to have fairly reasonable response as well. The Panels will do that. This gives you more options. It's so much more flexible and so much more extensible in a way that other things just aren't. So there you have it, folks. If you want, in my opinion, the absolute best digital comic book experience, you're looking at an iPad. Whether it's an 11-inch size or a 13-inch size, you've got a lot more flexibility. You have the responsiveness that you get from an iPad that you don't get from any of these other devices. And especially if you're on a newer one, you get one of, if not the best screen on just about any device I've ever seen, and certainly the best screen on anything you can put in a bag or carry in your hand. I've said it before. I've talked about it here. I think e-ink is fascinating, but it isn't the be-all, end-all. And there are places where I think it loses out. For text and black and white, e-ink trumps. But the second you start throwing color in here, I don't think there's anything that's going to compare to the vibrant color that you're going to get from an iPad. Plus, Panels as an app works so much better than just about anything else that you can find on Android. That alone makes a huge difference. So there's our wrap up. I think if you're determined to go e-ink, look at one of the Boox Color devices. The Tab XC is really nice. I'm sure that the 10-inch versions look the same and are just a little smaller and honestly more portable. If you want, though, the best experience, the most versatile, and the best color and the best performance, you can't beat an iPad. The application ecosystem also just enhances that and really puts it head and shoulders above anything else. But what are your thoughts? What have you tried? Go ahead, subscribe, like, share this with other people, and then leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts are. As much as I like e-ink, I really was disappointed with how the color devices have fared. It's something that's still progressing, and there's just enough drawbacks with it that I think if you want color, you're better off going with a more traditional tablet experience. There's drawbacks there too, but that's what all of this is. It's weighing pluses and minuses, pros and cons to end up with something. And what I think we've ended up on is, for most comic books, an iPad is your best bet.